Starting off at number 10, we have Vancouver Island. Vancouver Island is a beautiful island on the west coast of Canada where tons of tourists go to visit each year. But the island has a dark secret, and that's the fact that more than 36 people are currently listed as missing on the island. For some families, it's been years since their loved ones were last seen on Vancouver Island, with the oldest disappearance dating back to 1978. Lindsay Nichols is one child that went missing when she was just 14, with her disappearing in late July 1993 while walking along Royston Road in Comex Valley. On the 25th anniversary of her disappearance, her mother said she literally vanished, and her family really needs to know what happened to her. The RCMP has received over 400 tips and done 15 polygraphs related to that case, but there are still no answers. And because missing people on the island are growing each year, citizens have taken the matter into their own hands, with Felicity Camp creating a Facebook group after a person she had a personal connection with disappeared on the island. Currently, that group has 700 members and grows with each new missing person that is reported, with her saying in a statement, quote, "People don't just disappear. Someone has to know something. Some of them are just baffling."
Coming in at number 9, we have the canoe trip. Back in August of this year, a mother and her child went on a little canoe trip in northern Saskatchewan, and they certainly weren't prepared for what was going to happen to them. That afternoon, the current was so strong that they were swept away and ended up at an unoccupied island. The wind was so strong that no matter what they did, they couldn't gain control of their canoe. They were stuck on the island for just a day before they were rescued. In our 8th spot, we have HELP. Back in 2016, 3 men were deserted on a remote island near Micronesia after their boat capsized in the South Pacific island. The 3 men originally had plans for a short sailing trip, but the weather became brutal and tipped over their boat. And it was at night when this happened, so they swam 2 miles in the dark until they reached land. From there, they used palm leaves to spell out the word help on the island's sand. Thankfully, the men were only stranded for 3 days before a US Navy plane spotted their fire and then their sign and came to their rescue. In our 7th spot, we have Philip Ashton. In June of 1722, fisherman Philip Ashton joined a crew who planned to sail the waters of Nova Scotia. But while at sea, the crew was captured by pirates, and Philip was held as their captive. For 9 months, Philip was stuck being the pirates' prisoner. But all of that changed in March of 1723. That's when they docked on shore and Philip made a run for it. The pirates searched for him briefly before giving up and getting back on the boat. Philip was then left stranded on the island all alone with no tools or food. But he managed to make a little shelter and ate fruit and turtle eggs to survive. 16 months later, a British ship rescued Philip, and he lived to tell the tale, and even wrote a book about it. Coming in at number 6, we have the Friends. Back in 2012, friends Jesse Brillin and Brian and Dave Martinuke were out boating when the strong winds and rough waters caused their boat to capsize. They managed to pull the inflatable raft from the boat and spent 15 hours drifting hopelessly. Eventually, they drifted close to land, where they were stranded for 10 days. They used driftwood to build a shelter and ate sea urchins, seaweed, and clam beds for food. On the 10th day, a sailboat spotted the trio's pile of garbage on shore before seeing the men and rescuing them. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the SOS. A couple of months ago in August, 3 sailors got stranded on an island after attempting to make a 23 nautical mile journey. However, they ended up getting lost and their boat ran out of fuel. They were stranded on this island for 3 days before being rescued by the Australian and US authorities. During these 3 days, they managed to make a small shelter and a large SOS sign out of debris. On the 3rd day, this sign was spotted by a passing aircraft, and that was the reason why they were found. Moving on at number 4, we have the river monsters. This next man got found by sheer accident. He's actually quite lucky. So in 2016, a fisherman was out sailing when he decided to leave his boat to go to try and find better oysters. But on his journey back, he got sunstroke and couldn't go any further. As a result, he had to spend the night on the beach. The next morning, he tried to travel back some more, but again, the heat and sun were too much for him. By then, his boat was gone and he was stuck on the island. island. But lucky for him, a TV series called River Monster arrived on the island, as they were using it as their filming location. That's when they came across the fisherman, who ran out of the cave to the crew naked, flailing his arms all about. The crew literally saved his life. Now, this man is so lucky because the crew weren't even supposed to film at this island in the first place. They were planning on using a different island, but changed locations last minute due to choppy waters. Little did they know that by doing this would save a man's life. In our third spot, we have Ada Blackjack. In 1921, Ada Blackjack struggled to take care of her son who was suffering from tuberculosis. In order to make more money for her son's treatments, Ada joined a team of explorers as a cook and seamstress. But the journey didn't go as planned. Quickly, they were out of food and had to go hunt to obtain more. Ada was left to care for a crewman, Lorne Knight, who was suffering from scurvy, while the others went to go look for more food. They never returned for Ada or Lorne. From there, she had to learn how to survive. She would trap and kill wild animals for her and Lorne. Sadly, Lorne passed away, but Ada managed to survive for 2 years alone. On August 19th, 1923, Ada was rescued by one of the men that left her there in the first place. Like, the nerve that dude had to come back after all those years. I would have been pissed. Like, yes, I'm here, I'm still alive, thank you for leaving me. In our second spot, we have the Castaways. Now, this story is a bit different than the rest of the ones on the list. In this case, the two wanted to be left on a deserted island. So back in 1980, a British writer put an ad in Time Out magazine saying that he wanted a female to live with him on a deserted island. I don't know about you, but I would be a little sketched out by that ad. But one lady, Lucy Irvine, was intrigued by it. And so the two set out to Toon Island. Now, she was only 24 years old, but the British writer was 49. Now, he didn't plan this through enough, because there wasn't enough fresh water to sustain them and hardly any vegetation on this island. The two survived on the island for about a year when they were saved by some islanders. If it wasn't for them, they wouldn't have survived because they were running out of the necessities. Story goes that Lucy was the one keeping them both alive, but the other dude, on the other hand, had given up faith a number of times. He didn't think they were gonna make it. And in our number one spot, we have Alexander Selkirk. Alexander Selkirk was a Scottish man who is famous for surviving on an island for 4 years. So in October of 1704, Selkirk was a part of a crew sailing around Cape Horn. But the crew started to become very sick. Many were dying of disease and their food supply was diminishing. Plus the food that they did have was all infested with worms. And the ship was in rough shape. So he told the captain they should just abandon the ship and wait for help. The captain was not too fond of this idea. And so Alexander got off the ship and waited around on a deserted island thinking that another ship would be along shortly. Well, shortly was 4 years and 4 months later. All he was left with was some clothing, a musket, some tools, a Bible, and tobacco. To survive, he found fresh water, ate goats and seals and plums, and he even tamed a wild cat to keep him company and to keep the vermin away from him while he slept.
Starting off this countdown, we have the cannibalism. A lot of people are under the impression that the Sentinelese people on this island are cannibals. Because of their hostility and unadvanced lifestyle, people think they are completely wild. On a number of occasions, trespassers have been killed by this tribe, their bodies put on display before being buried. Never eaten. It's also believed that this theory was born after learning about the practices of a neighboring tribe. That tribe would cut up and burn the flesh of the deceased tribe members. This was said to prevent them from being consumed by evil spirits. But in 2006, a group of researchers studied the island and found no evidence that they practiced this deed. So it seems like this creepy theory is inaccurate.
In at number 9, Thai island of Koh Tao. British backpackers David Miller and Hannah Withridge planned a vacation to a beautiful island in Thailand for a peaceful getaway, but the vacation did not end up that way. As on September 15, 2014, their bodies were found on the island of Koh Tao in Thailand after being missing for days. The two hadn't known each other before going on the trip and met each other while they were both backpacking in Thailand. After their bodies were found, it was discovered that the two had suffered from head wounds, and authorities determined that they were beaten with a garden tool. 2 Burmese migrants were the main suspects for the crime, although they denied being responsible, and the 2 men were sentenced to death in 2015 for the crime. In at number 8, Eileen Moore. Eileen Moore is a remote island on the Flannan Islands, and it wasn't inhabited by anyone other than the lighthouse keepers. And even though nobody lived there, people were very intrigued by the island, and many people came to visit it hundreds of years ago. The lighthouse was built in 1895, and not only was it a geographical nightmare, but it was also allegedly haunted by unearthly dwellers, with various urban legends being made about the island. In the year 1900, Captain James Harvey and Joseph Moore set sail to the island, but when they arrived, no one was there to greet them on their arrival, even though they had blown the horn multiple times. Joseph Moore then went to check on the lighthouse, and was shocked to see that the door to the lighthouse was unlocked, and there was half-eaten food laying around with an overturned chair sitting on the ground. Then the two men decided to search the island, finding nothing after hours of searching. When even more people got involved, they discovered some unusual lighthouse entries in a diary from days before the disappearance, saying that the winds were the worst they had been in 20 years, even though there were no reported storms in the last few months. The men continued searching for days, even calling in help, but they were never found, and even hundreds of years later, people are still trying to figure out what happened, with the island still being best known for the disappearances to this day. In at number 7, the lost colony of Roanoke. The lost colony of Roanoke is one of the most widely known disappearances of many people going missing on an island, as 100 settlers who were living on the island, now located in North Carolina, disappeared in the late 1580s, and it still remains unsolved. The colony was established by John White, who left the colony to go to England to get supplies, but when he returned years later with the supplies, the settlement was gone. The only clues that were left were the word Croatan carved on a fence post and crow on a tree, as well as a skeleton. Croatan was the name of a native tribe that lived on Roanoke as well. The tribe was never found, but there are many theories of what happened to the people. The most popular is that the tribe encountered some sort of disease that wiped them all out, or that they clashed with another group, and none of the people survived that war. And at number 6, the Greek island of Crete. Suzanne Eaton, who was a molecular biologist, disappeared while out for a run on July 2nd of 2019, and she was visiting the island for a medical conference. Her family promptly came to the island to help and find her, with the story being shared all across the world. But unfortunately on July 8th, her body was found, and she was found in a former World War II bunker after she was abused and suffocated. After extensive investigation, a 27-year-old man was charged for her murder. Halfway through number 5, Belize Island. On January 8th of 2020, Allison Mackenzie went missing on a small island in Belize, and the disappearance is very strange. Mackenzie was on a catamaran tour in Rendezvous Key, Belize. Her and the group, including her boyfriend, arrived on the small island on a Friday night, and by Saturday morning, she was missing. And the strangest thing is that no one lives on the island. It's only really used for tours to come through like that one. Police told the news that she was reported to have been last seen walking around the island around 10 p.m. on the Friday night, and her boyfriend woke up to her not being in their bed and not being able to find her. The Belize police believe she could have been drunk and drowned in the water while swimming, but her family doesn't believe this is true, as they claim she'd never been drunk in her life. And the sad part is that Allison has still not been found, and her family is still searching for answers. And at number 4, Venice Island. One of the most haunted islands in the world is in Venice, Italy, and it's so badly haunted that the Italian government won't let anyone anywhere near it. The island, called Poveglia, was used for many terrifying purposes back in its heyday. Firstly, it's a massive graveyard, with more than 100,000 people being buried on the small island, with most of the bodies being from plague victims in the 14th century or asylum patients in the late 1800s. And since there is such a large amount of bodies in such a small island, the soil is now roughly 50% human remains. Ugh. And many urban legends have stated that the voices of the dead can be heard on this island, with human remains being well known to wash up on the shore. And there are many stories of people that have visited to never return. And even though nobody is supposed to set foot on the island, daring people still do, with some tourists illegally visiting the island in 2016 and attempting to stay overnight. But the tourists were so scared by whatever was on the island, their terrified screams were heard on nearby boats. And I actually visited Venice recently, and I had no idea this existed. I would have totally loved to go on a boat ride around it or something, but also considering how haunted it was, it's probably best I didn't. And at number 3, Lost. The television show Lost is probably one of the most terrifying islands ever portrayed on TV or movies. The premise of the show is that it follows survivors of a plane crash that landed on an island between Sydney and Los Angeles in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But what makes the island so terrifying is that it's surrounded by a shield of electromagnetic energy, which causes displacement or even death if people try and leave the island. But that's not the only creepy thing about the island, and there's literally so much scary stuff surrounding the island it would take hours to explain. But in summary, the creepiest stuff is the electromagnetic field that changes the residents of the island for good and bad, the time travel, and the whispers that they hear. The survivors of the plane crash were on the island for 108 days, but don't worry, I won't spoil the ending for you guys. In at number 2, Alaska's Bermuda Triangle. Next up, we have the very strange disappearance of people inside of an area called Alaska's Bermuda Triangle. The triangle stretches from the state's north coast from Barrow all the way to Anchorage and to Juneau across the southern coast, and it's filled with mainly unexplored wilderness. And thousands of people have been reported to have gone missing within this triangle, with hundreds of search and rescue missions conducted each year, but troops rarely finding anyone dead or alive. The triangle first got mainstream attention when US House Majority Leader Hale Boggs' airplane vanished in the triangle in 1972. This disappearance triggered one of the nation's largest search missions ever, spanning 39 days, covering an area of 32,000 square miles. But nothing was ever found, no bodies or even debris from the plane. But this wasn't the only plane to ever do this, as there are many cases of planes going down in the region. Since 1988, more than 16,000 people have vanished in the Alaskan Triangle, resulting in 4 missing people for every 1,000 people living in Alaska. So I think the moral of the story is to not ever go there under any circumstances. Up at number 1, Amelia Earhart. And topping this list we have Amelia Earhart. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart is one of the most talked about of all time. She vanished roughly 80 years ago while she was attempting to fly around the world with her navigator Fred Noonan. But unfortunately both disappeared during this expedition and were never found again. However, a photo that was discovered recently looks to show 2 people that resemble Earhart and Noonan on a dock. And many analysts have now studied the photo and they've determined that the photo is not photoshopped or doctored. And they also feel confident that it's the 2 pilots that were missing, with researchers determining that these photos must have been taken on the Japanese-controlled Marshall Islands after the pair made some sort of crash landing. However, the theory of why they were never heard from again isn't a happy one, with people thinking that they could have both been captured by the Japanese, with them thinking the pair were some sort of spies, with some theories even debating whether Earhart was actually a spy, and the whole mission was actually just a lie for her to go spy on other nations, with some even thinking that the Japanese knew this and that's why they killed Earhart, and she was never heard from again.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Johnson family. It's hard enough being stuck in quarantine with your family. I can't imagine how it would be stuck on a deserted island with them. In the early 90s, the Johnson family headed out sailing on their family boat. However, the family of 4 encountered some rough waters which resulted in their boat tipping over. Unable to save their small boat, they watched it sink right before their eyes as they bobbed up and down in the freezing cold waters. The family ended up making it to a nearby island and survived there for nearly 40 days. They would collect rain droplets for drinking and caught turtles and fish as their food source. Thankfully, they were rescued by a local fisher who saw them on the island. That's definitely one method of family bonding. Moving on to number 9, we have the secret facility. Okay, this next theory is more on the wild side. It was posted by Reddit user SlyFry. According to them, they have a theory that North Sentinel Island is home to a top secret research facility, and the people on the island are protecting it. I mean, the Sentinelese are very violent, and they will kill anyone that comes close to their island. Maybe it's because they have to guard this secret facility with their life. I mean, it would be a good place for a secret facility, just because of how secret and protected the island is. And it would be the last place people would think a secret facility would be. That's just one crazy theory. It also could explain why the Indian government doesn't allow sharing of images taken of the Sentinelese or of the island.
Moving on, at number 8 we have the fake shipwreck. In August of 1981, a Hong Kong freighter known as the Primrose ended up getting in a shipwreck a couple of meters away from the North Sentinel Island. As soon as this happened, they were greeted by 50 locals with spears and arrows. They began launching attacks at the boat. The captain immediately made a desperate call for help, asking for weapons to be airdropped so they could defend themselves. Thankfully, the crew members were rescued by a helicopter and left uninjured. But the remains of the wrecked ship still remain near the island. Theory goes that this never even happened? A shipwreck never occurred and the ship was just placed there as a ploy to make the story more credible. Now, why would they make this up? Well, to make the story of this dangerous island more credible. Again, to prevent outsiders from trespassing on the island. Either to keep the Sentinelese safe or to keep their top secret facility safe.
In our 7th spot, we have the tsunami. In 2004, a big tsunami struck the North Sentinel Island. When things settled, a bunch of Indian Coast Guard helicopters flew over the island to see if they needed any help. They expected the worst outcome. But surprisingly, everything was okay. They managed to survive this deadly tsunami. The question is, how? Well, that's when this theory comes in. Some believe that the Sentinelese were protected by amulets of ancestral bones. They sensed the storm was coming and went out and scattered pig and turtle skulls around their island. And in the end, that is what protected them from this deadly storm.
Coming in at number 6, we have the encounter. In 1991, a group of Indian anthropologists led by Mr. Pandit made peaceful contact with the Sentinelese. It started off with them bringing gifts for them, like coconuts, to show them they mean no harm. In fact, There's some photos and videos of this team's interaction with the tribe, and it's astonishing. The Sentinelese didn't seem afraid at all. So what happened? What changed their ways? I mean, in 1996, the Indian government banned any researchers from visiting the island. But what caused them to become more hostile towards outsiders again? Theory goes that between 1991 and 1996, something very bad happened, like an encounter gone wrong. The government is scared of bringing outsider diseases to the island. Maybe that's exactly what happened, which led to the ban in 1996.
We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with John Allen Chau. In November of 2018, John Allen Chau believed with the power of God he would be able to convert the Sentinelese to Christianity and help them. He believed that this island was Satan's last stronghold on Earth. He felt it was his mission to help them. So he went there from America and tried to make contact with them. John's first attempt at making contact with them didn't go as planned. As soon as he stepped foot on the island, several men came charging at him, firing arrows. So he fled. But on November 16th, he tried again. He got a fisherman to drop him off alone. And that was the last time anyone had seen him. They just assumed he had been taken captive by the locals and was killed. But his body was never recovered. In fact, they tried to recover his body a number of times, but have never been successful. Theory goes, though, that John is actually still alive and is living there with them in peace. According to anthropologist T.N. Pandit, who has encountered the group on a number of occasions, he has described them as being largely peace-loving. But when they see someone new invading their territory, they get violent. But if Pandit was able to gain their trust and get close to them, maybe John actually was able to do the same. Who knows? According to a fisherman, he saw the tribe members dragging a dead body by a rope, but we don't know if that really was John's.
Moving on, at number 4 we have the government experimentation. Theory goes that the government is actually holding the Sentinelese captive there. This is all against their will. Why are they doing this? Well, theory goes that they are running a number of experiments on them, like how long they are able to sustain their hunter-gatherer lifestyle, or how long they can go living and repopulating with a small amount of people. Because in the end, there's not going to be a lot of genetic variety there. There have already been concerns about inbreeding going on. Maybe this is all done at the hands of the Indian government.
In our 3rd spot, we have the Malaysian Flight 370. On March 8th of 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared without a trace. To this day, no one knows what happened to this flight and the 227 passengers and 12 crew members on board. But NVJDS on Reddit has a theory on the flight's disappearance. He thinks that the missing flight was purposely crashed onto North Sentinel Island. Since the island keeps everyone away, no one would go looking there for a plane, and they wouldn't be able to even if they tried. As for why the plane was crashed there, I have no idea. But this kind of makes sense. Researchers that have tried to make contact with the island said the Sentinelese had new weapons made of metal. How could they get their hands on metal? Well, if a plane crashed there, they would have access to a lot of metal scraps, which was then used to make better spears and arrows.
And in our 2nd spot, we have the brainwashing. Okay, this is another pretty extreme and messed up theory, but as you know from Lindsay's earlier point, John Allen Chau went to North Sentinel Island to try and help the Sentinelese, a move that many think was dumb and pointless. But John was determined to bring Christianity to them. Theory goes that John was actually brainwashed and sent there on a mission on behalf of other missionaries. In 2017, during a boot camp missionary training, that's when he first got the idea to preach to the Sentinelese. Theory goes that something went down at that training, maybe the missionaries were all brainwashed with different missions, John's being to make connection to the tribe.
And in our number 1 spot, we have Maurice Vidal Portman. This theory was shared on Twitter by the user Respectable Lawyer. They might have discovered why the Sentinelese people are so violent towards outsiders. Let's take a look at a man named Maurice Vidal Portman. Back in the day, Maurice was assigned to look over the Andaman Islands and the Andamanese, but he ended up kidnapping some locals and took disturbing photos of them. He also would treat them like objects and would measure every inch of them. Every inch. He had an unhealthy obsession with them. He did this up until 1880 when he started focusing on North Sentinel Island. He abducted an elderly couple there who soon passed away from outside diseases. So it's thought that he did the same thing to the Sentinelese people. And this is what caused them to become so defensive to outsiders. Because in the past, this creepy man abducted members of their tribe and ran tests on them. In the end, they are scared this will happen again.